This week on Moments That Matter, we're featuring part one of a keynote address presented by Dr. Alan Lee to the faculty of Southern Wesleyan University. Dr. Lee presently serves as a program director and professor of Christian counseling at Kingswood University and is a committed Christian seeking to honor God through his work in the world of counseling. His presentation deals with personal wellness, carrying significant value in this extended era of continued COVID. I think you'll find his words both comforting and challenging as we learn to be our best selves during this ongoing global pandemic.
It really is an honor to be able to spend a few minutes with your team, some of whom I've had an opportunity to spend parts of life with, and all of you who I know to be respected and valued. And certainly an opportunity to kind of reflect upon your call to ministry, your call to this education. And what I'd like to do is kind of focus in on, as you identify the title here, personal well-being and what that may look like. But I would like to just tell you a little bit about myself as we begin our conversation today. Probably the most important thing, or definitely the most important thing, is that I'm a believer. And right behind that is the fact that I'm a proud family member. I have a wonderful wife, Vicki, 4 incredible adult daughters, a son-in-law, and a grandson that will be joining us in August. In addition to that, 2 dogs, 2 rabbits, 16 chickens, and the neighborhood cat that walks through the yard occasionally. But I'm blessed in all of that. And again, I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I was born and raised in Traverse City, Michigan. I lived there for just about 20 years before I went into university. I attended United Wesleyan College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, received my degree in youth ministry there, and then moved into local church ministry and worked as an assistant pastor in both Trinity Wesleyan in Allentown and Bethany Wesleyan in Cherryville. During that time, moved through my ordination process. And while I was in ministry, particularly with young adults, it became very clear to me that I didn't know all I needed to know. And counseling was one of those areas that I truly found myself lacking. And so I kind of stepped away from my role there and began studies in counseling psychology at Southern University. In the midst of my study there, I began to work in a large community hospital, a multi-site community hospital in the Lehigh Valley within the Department of Psychiatry, and had the pleasure of working there for a full 10 years. 7 of those years were on inpatient units, adult, acute, and subacute, as well as adolescent units. The last 3 years, I had the privilege of being a senior therapist in their partial hospitalization program, which is kind of a bridge between inpatient and community counseling. I have continued education and most recently done graduate work in professional counseling at Liberty University. I joined faculty here at Kingswood in 2003 and serve as the director of counseling. An honor to be here and a real joy to be a part of this community. One of the more recent things that we've done within our Department of Counseling was the establishment of our counseling center here on campus. Just about a year and a half ago, opened this center, and it is growing. We have 4 licensed counselors and 1 discipleship coach. We serve the campus, students and staff, as well as the community. And so it's a great benefit to us, and it's, again, an honor for me to be a part of that. But what I want to kind of do, kind of on the heels of all of that, is talk to you a little bit about kind of moving forward in healthy ways. Here in New Brunswick, we have snow tires on our vehicles for almost half a year. A good 5 months of the year, we have snow tires on. And as spring rolls around, we take our vehicles in and have those tires switched around. And inevitably, when we have that done, we also need to have a lineup or an alignment done on our vehicle. Driving in New Brunswick, we're driving through snow drifts. We don't have to go far to find potholes. All of those kinds of things bring us out of alignment. I don't presume to know what each of your lives have been like for the last little bit, but I can assume that there may have been some snow drifts that kind of jostled you a bit, maybe a pothole or two, and maybe even some really positive things that have bumped you around just a little bit. So my hope today is to kind of move off from what I would call the Maslow model here and look at three primary things. First of all, I'd like to begin talking about self-care. From there, we'll move into the idea of boundaries, the importance of boundaries, and how that ties together with caring for ourselves. And then from there, the stepping point, talk a little bit to you about legacy and making an imprint. So let's move into self-care. I want to begin with what I call the foundational 5, and I've added +2 to this, but this is a discussion that I've had with everybody on campus, probably every opportunity I have a chance to share it for the last number of years. The 5 things that I think are foundational to well-being, and they're not new to us. They are things that we are all familiar with and likely have been exposed to, but it is valuable to bring it back into sight and maybe to put a new perspective on it. So let's talk about the foundational 5, and then we'll come back and add 2 to those. The first thing of the foundational 5 that I want to draw our attention to is the importance of sleep. Again, this is not something that is new. Science is really backing this up in big ways, that we are finding that we as adults need a good 8, sometimes 9 hours of sleep to function well. I'm not going to ask for responses or any show of hands of how well we do that. I typically, especially on a Monday morning class, will go in and ask them, how are you doing? How are the foundation sums up? Or some other place. I'm not going to do that for you, but you do it for yourself. 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night on a consistent basis. And science, again, is telling us that regular schedule is important. If we can be in bed at about the same time and out of bed at about the same time, it is valuable to us. Benefits, there are many. We feel better. Our mood is better. We have greater creativity. Our productivity is increased. Our immune system is stronger. All of those things are positives to us. We are also finding that if we have less than 6 hours of sleep a night, it contributes to coronary issues, and we increase our potential rate of stroke and heart attack. 6 to 7 hours, we are twice as likely to have an auto accident, according to AAA. And if we get less than 5 hours, that figure quadruples. So there's great reason for us to consider sleep that we consider so basic, but maybe you don't utilize it as well. I had a student come to me just this semester who's been on campus for a few years, and she said, Dr. Lee, I know you talk about sleep all the time, but I didn't believe you until I tried it, and it's a life changer. When I go to bed, I get sleep, I get out of bed, and it's made a difference. So sleep is an important of the foundational 5. The second one is nutrition. Again, so basic, I kind of feel guilty touching down on it. We know the principles of eating healthy. For me, nutrition is important because it seems to indicate when my sleep is off. If I am underslept, I'm the guy who was drawn to a extra large double coffee with 2 Boston cream donuts. None of that is good for me, but it is an indicator that I need to look back and see where that's coming from. So again, sleep, but healthy nutrition. Exercise, again, another principle that is backed by science, and we're told that even 30 minutes of walking on a daily basis can impact us in healthy ways so readily. Heart health, weight management, stress reduction. It increased our moods. It boosts our energy, helps our memories, and again comes back to increase our productivity and creativity. Some would say that I would put this right in the middle of the day if you got a chance to walk during lunch, or you may save it for end of day. Wherever you find the benefit, slip it into that. The great thing about walking is that it's great for us today, but it also splashes forward into tomorrow and gives us a head start on feeling good for tomorrow. The fourth foundation, spiritual practices. Again, this is nothing that I need to introduce you to, but to draw back to your attention. The things that are important to you spiritually play a role in your wellness. Certainly prayer and the opportunity to look at Father, not to just have communication, but actually to have an opportunity to focus upon our Father, to focus upon our relationship with him, and pull back away maybe from some of the things that are around us that are stressful. Scripture reading. Moments of silence. I love this idea, and if we can carve out even just 20 minutes from a day or every other day, how regularly we can do it, the better. To just sit in silence. Find that comfortable spot, find that place without distraction, turn the noises off, and just sit and listen. For me, I find that's when God speaks to me. It's probably when he actually gets through to me and I'm able to listen to him, is when I can quiet myself and be able to just sit. If we've got challenges with this, what I would say is do the best you can. I've spoken to people who have said, I sit down and my thoughts just go crazy. You may want to just jot those thoughts down so you can come back to silence. But moments of silence, 20 minutes a day, would be ideal for us. And then days of Sabbath. Again, the days where we can designate the whole chunk of day, if we can, to being with God, to being with self, maybe being with family, to quieting and recentering. And the list goes on and on with spiritual practices. The fifth foundational principle, I could spend a lot of time here and I won't. This just seems to be my hot button. But to limit technology use, if we can stay away from online time or manage it effectively, it's got some great benefits to us. Research, again, is talking to us about how levels of depression and anxiety are increased in conjunction with our time online, particularly when we talk about social media. Recent studies out looking at young adults and late teens are finding that population is on social media as much as 5 hours a day. At the other end of that, we're being told that no more than 30 minutes should be the goal. 30 minutes is kind of the line of health for that. But when you think of just the practical ideas of how technology can pull us away from, we can identify that there are lower levels of personal connection. You don't have to look far to see people standing in a group but being disconnected because they're focused on the phone that is in their hand. Another element to this is that there is also this sense of wasted time that comes with too much time on technology. That rolls ahead to increasing levels of stress. We feel behind on what we have committed to. So that if we can pull back on the time online, it's a valuable thing. A few years ago, I did an exercise with my students in the counseling program and asked them, we called it Fall Breakup Week. I asked them to break up with their technology, specifically their phone, for a week, to keep it in the backpack, maybe keep it in their residence, but to get some space from it. And at the beginning of the week, I had them fill out a Beck depression and anxiety scale, and at the end of the week, had them fill out the same. It was just a 7-day practice. Many students were unable to do it. They tried it for a day or two, found that they couldn't actually fulfill it, and dropped out. Those who were able to follow through with the majority of the time had some pretty good insights. Again, they recognized that any levels of anxiety in particular that were there earlier had decreased by the end of the week, just over a 7-day period. And one student in particular came to me and said, I didn't realize that I was using 3 and 4 hours of my day just scrolling through my phone. And when I put the phone away, I had time then to do my homework, and everything lightened up and gave me some extra space. So managing technology rather than letting it manage us is an important element to that. One additional thing I would add on to this is the limitation of news publications. However you get your news, my tendency is while I'm having breakfast in the morning, I may switch on the news for a few minutes. I find that 10 minutes is all I need. It gives me one loop of what's going on in the world before it goes into repeated loops. I get a sense of what's going on, but I don't feel like I get overwhelmed by it or too submerged in it. So even limiting our exposure to news publications is an important element. So these are the foundational 5. And I've added 2. Number 6 is to embrace comfort. And some of you may be familiar with this concept of hygge. My Norwegian grandmother would probably not support the way I pronounce it. I'm doing my best grammar. But it talks about the element of coziness, of feelings of contentment. It really speaks about how we place ourselves in our environment and how that fulfills what we need, and essentially the contentment, the sense of well-being. Lots of ways to do it. Some of the ones that are most readily utilized is the idea of warm light, particularly in colder weather. If you've got a fireplace, if you can light candles at any point, Edison bulbs as opposed to fluorescent lights, natural sunlight, the tactile sense of soft, comfortable fabrics. There may be blankets, there may be scarves, maybe hoodies, weighted blankets. Those kinds of things bring comfort. Even things like a warm cup of coffee on a cool morning, or a cool sweet tea on a warm morning or warm afternoon. What we serve ourselves, and again, in Norway, the idea is to serve soup daily in cold weather because it brings a sense of warmth. Idea of favorite places. Where do you like to sit? Where do you like to be? Can you be there? Can you enjoy those spaces? For me, we have a pretty large fire pit in the back of our yard. We've got some Adirondack chairs sitting around there. I like to just sit there, whether there's a fire or not. That would be one of my favorite places, to just sit and listen to the birds, to just relax, to feel good. Across from my desk here in my office, I have a comfortable chair that when I get tired of sitting at my desk, I just shift over to that chair where it seems to add a new perspective, a new sense of well-being. The idea behind all of these is that we focus on what we control and we embrace those things. There are a number of things in our environment that we can't control, or we think we can't control. But when we stop and think, maybe there are some things. We can draw some lamps into our workspace or where we live. We can find a comfortable place to sit, those kinds of things. So to embrace comfort. And then finally, number 7, consider your perspective. Try to look at things as a blessed opportunity rather than a burden. And so this is very much a reframing aspect. There are a number of things that come across our path and maybe walk along with us for a period of time that we don't invite into our journey. If we can reframe them just a little bit, maybe even to ask the question, since this is not going away anytime soon, is there a way I can make friends with it? Which seems really counterintuitive. How do I want to, why would I want to be friends with something I don't want around? But when you think of how we use our energy, we use a lot more energy pushing away things that we don't want around us than we would if we try to understand, let's maybe call it an illness. We have, there's a physical illness. Well, let me understand what this is. What can I do to have as much control in this as possible? If it's going to walk with me for a while, I want to understand it and move ahead in that. A second idea of kind of considering perspective is to remember that your time is under your direction. And that doesn't always feel like the case. And sometimes we need to kind of remind ourselves and take hold of that. One of the ways we can do that is to not take pride in our busyness, but to be able to monitor things a little bit closely. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to read Greg McKeown's book, Essentialism. I would recommend it to you. He writes from a business perspective. He says this, he said, our highest priority is to protect our ability to prioritize. When things are feeling a little fast-paced and out of control for us, if we have the opportunity to decide what comes first, to prioritize, to focus on what is most important, and let those things that are not so important fade away, it helps us in building a healthy foundation. So those are the foundational 5 plus 2, and it leads us then into, and McKeown takes us right to the whole idea of boundaries. We know what a boundary is. We live with them. There are all kinds of physical boundaries. We have boundaries around where we live. We'll call that a home. There are doors on the rooms that give boundaries. There are seatbelts in our vehicles that keep us in boundaries. Those are usually pretty easy to manage, but it's more the emotional activity kind of boundaries that sometimes it's helpful to take a look at and be reminded of. So again, this is nothing that you haven't seen before, but to be able to look at what our priorities are in life can help us to establish the boundaries that are necessary. And for me to go to my calendar is a great way to begin. There are elements that should show up on, or I think should show up on my calendar. I'll say that. I won't put it on you, but I'd recommend it. One of those things is your sleep. If it's healthy for us to get 8 hours of sleep, let's put it in the calendar. Let's block that time out because that's a part of that day. There are things like our time with God. Let's put it on the calendar. There are things like family time, family dinners, date nights, maybe activities with your children. You name it, you fill it in. If it is important to you, I suggest that it should go on your calendar. And then I would say, just to be a little bit more kind to you, draw some margins around those. Rather than having your priorities go back to back, maybe give yourself 15, 20, maybe even 30 minutes on either side of that activity. And what that does for me is it takes away the feeling that I have to run from one thing to another. Sometimes I don't have that control. But when I'm able to be able to walk, to be able to maybe grab a coffee on the way or have a conversation, it slows down the pace of my life and helps me to feel like I have a little bit more control, and then I'm feeling just a little bit put together, a little bit more well. Edith Edgar has recently written a book called The Gift, and this is a quote from her book. It says, "Sometimes life requires you to go with the flow. Sometimes it's the right thing to prioritize others' needs, to modify our plans. But generosity isn't generous if we chronically give at the expense of ourselves. If our giving makes us a martyr or fuels our resentment." So this is the vital reason for boundaries. To be able to identify what I can give, how I can give it, and what I can't because of my own well-being. Hard to walk away from a situation feeling resentful because I put myself into that situation. So there are times when the only healthy response to an opportunity is, "Thank you, but I'm sorry I can't do that," or "No, thank you. Maybe next time." To be able to draw that boundary. I recognize that's a difficult practice and sometimes a hard concept to identify. We feel like we should be able to take things on, but there is a price when we overload. And at the end of the day, we are the one that is responsible for how well we are and how we overload or balance. So being able to say no is a valuable process. So stress informs boundary setting. You know that there's a good stress, eustress, that is one of those things that keeps us motivated. It's similar to the anticipation we have around a first date or a New Year's resolution. It's something that really kind of motivates us and moves us ahead. It kind of gets us to the goals that we're hoping to find. It also helps us to think further ahead to some of the bigger, the existential issues, and be motivated to think beyond where we are today. So when we talk about stress, there is a good stress, but then there is the stress that we are most common with, and it is what we feel based upon current situations or what our body may consider to be a threat or a mind may consider to be threatening to us. From stress, then we build into anxiety. So stress is what we're feeling right now. Anxiety is what I'm looking forward to tomorrow and how uncomfortable that feels. We often know that we're stressed because of our body. Our muscles talk to us a little bit about it. We maybe avoid situations because of the stress. So what I would say to you, be aware of what's going on. If your muscles are tense, and for me, sometimes I feel like my shoulders are kind of like drawn up. If you find yourself in that situation, take a minute and try to figure out what that's about. Take a minute to try to understand what that is. And again, what we know then may lead us to make some changes. For some, there's a constant feeling of being tense or worried or on edge. There may be an interference with our work, school, family, those things that are important to us in our life. There may be regular fears that appear that are really unsupported by reality, but we have that feeling about. And so we recognize that it may not be real, but we've got the impression of it. We may avoid everyday situations or activities because of the anxiety. We may experience some unexpected attacks of panic, which is a very uncomfortable situation to be in. We may live as if there's danger or catastrophe around the corner, and I would say that there are probably a number in our communities that have lived like this for the last little bit. And so we may be feeling some of that too, the unexpected, I don't know what is going to happen next kind of feeling. Maybe feelings of apprehension or dread. I don't feel like I can motivate myself in that direction. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Maybe difficulty concentrating, those things that we've done normally, we can't focus on anymore. Maybe it's preparing lectures, maybe it's listening in meetings, maybe it's being present in family conversations. Maybe the kind of feelings of being tense or even jumpy, on edge. And there are sometimes episodes where we kind of feel like our mind goes blank. We're lost without the next thought. So where does that come from? I think fair to say it comes from a combination of things. It wouldn't take long for any of us to think back to a situation where as a child or even as an adult, we were embarrassed or made to feel embarrassed. There are situations of violence or abuse that we have witnessed on some level that feed into, they inform our level of anxiety. Certainly environment plays a role in our levels of anxiety. Are we in high stimulation areas? Are there lots of demands placed upon us? And again, when we think back to the last few years, I would say that there's kind of an ambient stress that seems to be boiling up around us. That is our environment. We're impacted by that, whether we're really focusing on it directly or not. We're still impacted by what that feels like. Cognitively, there may be a misperception of a situation. And then for some, there's a biological element where there are systems in place, the amygdala in particular, that signals for us threat. And it is hypervigilant. It is on guard for us and sometimes brings anxiety when anxiety doesn't need to be there.
Thanks for listening to Moments That Matter, a podcast that looks at the moments in our lives that come along from time to time that have consequences long after the moment, especially those moments that have to do with the choice of vocation. In his book, Let Your Life Speak, Listening for the Voice of Vocation, Parker Palmer speaks of a clearness committee in the Quaker tradition, wherein a group of older, wiser people ask questions of someone considering a life choice as a way of clarifying the next step. We may not meet with a committee about these big decisions, but we all have these critical junctures in our lives, which we can think of as clearness committee moments. We need to pay attention to these moments because they are profound and potentially life-altering. We'll relay stories from our lives and interview others about theirs, especially noting the clearness committee moments, those we choose to recognize and those that were sadly ignored, those decisions that were made with God in mind and those that were not. Our hope is that these podcasts will cause you to think of the same kind of moments in your life with new clarity.